insights and solutions, and to note that this is our signature event as part of the UWI MONA's 2018 Research Days. I know you had many competing activities, so we're really honored and thankful that you are able to be with us today. I also want to note that this event is part of our contribution to the UWI's 70th anniversary. And this has taken many forms, even on top of a taxi, they're advertising the 70th anniversary. So please look out for those various events. I also invite you to join us in the tent where we have a poster, we have a booth there, a very exciting booth with posters and an interactive display that has been pulled together by our team. I particularly want to welcome DSP Carl Berry, who will be introduced later in the program by one of our BSc students, Ms. Baston, who is here. But we also specially welcome Professor Opal Palmer-Disa, who joined us last year as the University Director, responsible for the Regional Coordinating Office, as well as the 3 campus units, and she will bring greetings. So we also want to thank our sponsors, the UWI Research Day Committee and the media, for being with us. I particularly want to thank the IGDS MONA unit team that has been working assiduously with the Research Days Committee, Mrs. Kimberly Carr-Tobias, and I think some of you saw Kimberly outside, our research assistant. She's there if you just look for her, look at her and wave. That's Kimberly. And also Ms. Ingrid Nicely, who is our senior administrative assistant. So they've worked in the trenches, going to the meetings, and they have pulled together the exhibition, the posters, as well as the signature events. The other thing I want to say is the significance of this lecture. I myself have worked in the area of human trafficking, doing research and advocacy for a number of years, and I'm really honored to be able to have Mr. Berry, who has led this process at a national level, and he will speak about his own work and how we can be part of the solution. I want us to also see this event as part of our efforts to eliminate this modern-day slavery and to support the work of the National Task Force Against Human Trafficking, Trafficking in Persons, which is ably led by Mrs. Carol Palmer, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice. And I want you to leave today being part of the solution to this problem, because quite often we ourselves can be victims, but we can also facilitate the problem and crime of human trafficking. I also want to contextualize this as we're in the decade for people of African descent. And yes, not only persons who are of African descent who will be victims of human trafficking, but we know that for us in the region, people who are most vulnerable, women and children in particular, to sexual exploitation, but all of us need to be aware of our risks and our possibilities of being part of this network. We're running a bit late, so what I want to do is to now ask Professor Palmer-Disa to bring greetings on behalf of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies. And she won't need to adjust the mic, of course, because she is also vertically challenged. Please welcome her.
So I just want to correct this whole notion of being vertically challenged, which I'm not. I am the ideal weight. In fact, the Ife people in Africa who erroneously are called pygmy people are one of the most ecologically sound. When we live in an environment, regardless of how many years, and we leave, we do not leave any rubbish behind, which I can't say for this campus. And this is not about tidiness, but I am really appalled by the plastic and the other garbage in this campus. I've spoken to the principal about it, and I think we should banish and outlaw plastic and styrofoam. That said, it is indeed a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to see you here. my first research day, and I applaud the Mona unit for the work that they have done and continue to do, and their various partnerships with various organizations locally as well as internationally. I applaud the work that they're doing on child trafficking. I myself have not worked in this area except kind of surfacely when I was in Oakland. But it's an area and a topic that is very important to me. It is something I affirm every morning that I'm going to help to eliminate, although I must confess that I don't have any practical means and way of doing that. So it is with great pleasure and great honor that I welcome you from the Institute of Gender and Development Studies. Okay, I'm saying that incorrectly. But also from the regional office to just say it's good to be here. It's good that we're all concerned and working on these various issues that impact us. And because I'm a storyteller, I want to start with a story. A friend of mine in Buff Bay is working on child trafficking. And I think it's important that we understand stories, because in order for us to effect change, we have to listen to people's stories, and we have to know what it is that drives them. Child trafficking, crime, and any injustice continues because there is complicity. I want to say that again. Child trafficking, crime, and any injustice that exists in the community exists because there's complicity on the part of the community, and we are part of this community. So this is not a story I'm making up. I'm certainly write fiction, so I'm very versed in making up story. But this was a story that was told to me based on a real incident that really gave me an opportunity to re-look at how are we dealing with, exploring, examining, what are we doing to help to end child trafficking. She's not yet 30 with 2 boys, different fathers. Like many of us, she had hoped her life would be better. Her expectations were not outlandish: a house with a room of her own, running water and electricity. She had the latter now, the only good thing the last man who knocked out her tooth left. But since it is stolen, it comes and goes. Don't mention the boy's father. She will spew her anger and go on and on about them workless, them no good, so on so. She does not take any responsibility for having cohabit not once but twice with men with whom she now dismisses as workless, no good, easy dismissal. Before she realized the boys were valued, she would put them under the bed and told them to stay quiet while she slept with men for money, for food, for clothes, for books. But now they are her bank account. On the weekends, she sends them to the party by the man whom she knows, fondles, and do more with them. But what is she to do? She needs hair, she needs her nails done, she needs something to look good. And the boys are the only means that she have. Now, this story is not unlike many stories all over the world where parents or guardians sell children for money. We live in a very materialistic world, and some of us are more privileged than others. We have our needs met. We are not desperate. At least we don't think we're desperate, unless, of course, the mortgage comes due and, we can't find that money. But we have to look at, without judgment, at these women and men who are in the trafficking business, and we have to ask ourselves a very important moral question. Why are they selling their children? And while it is true that oftentimes the reason lies in economics, right, there are other moral considerations that we need to take into account. So what do we say to this mother of 2 boys who is not yet 30, who has had various abusive relationships, who is struggling and who thinks now this is an opportunity for her to get some food, to pay the rent, to get her nails done, because after all, she needs to look good. Now, we have an ethics committee at the university, so when our scholars and our students are doing research, particularly research that interface with the humans, we have to go through to make sure that we are adhering to good practices. I want to suggest that part of what we need to do in Jamaica, in every society where this kind of action and behavior is proliferating, that we really have to start at where it begins. And it begins with these mothers and these men and these other people who are part of the ring that allows for it to happen. And we have to say to ourselves, if we say that children are the future, either we believe it or we don't. If we say it takes a village to raise a child, either we believe it or we don't, because we know that in all of these cases, including child sexual abuse and physical abuse, people in the community know. They know and they remain silent. So what is it that allows for members of the community, most of whom know, to remain silent? The question then is a moral one, and it's also an economic one, and moral because it's tied to our economic base. This mother, in being interviewed, said she needed the money, and she was tired of working, and she needed a man, and she needed to look good, so she needed to get her nails done and her hair done. Value system. As we begin, or as we move on in our research, as we continue to try to find solution to these problems, I am suggesting that we start at the root, and that the root is not just that there is child trafficking, but what allows for it to happen from the very beginning. And so I want you to take home with you, or take away with you today, one of the things that I certainly want you to take away with you today is the story of this mother. And not judge her and condemn her, which we're often wont to do, because that doesn't really help the situation. But how do we get to her? If you were confronted with her, what would you say to her that might help to realign and recalibrate what she's thinking and feeling and what she's doing? Right? Because until we are able to get to the perpetrators, be they the mothers or the men or whomever who is doing it, and figure out what their story is and how we get to them and their story. I mean, we could lock them up, right? And we've been doing that, and more proliferates. So what we have to get to is what is the root cause, and how do we begin to erode those roots that are damaged, that are frail, that are morally bankrupt, that are economically depraved in a material society where money and wealth and how one looks takes precedence. So I thank you for being here, for all of the, I thank the presenters and for all of the information that they will impart. And I invite you to not be complicit. And by that I mean when you see or know of something that's happening in your community, to find the right authorities to share that information, because it's us. It's each of us working diligently, each of us being vigilant daily, each of us willing to put ourselves on the line that's going to change this situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Opal Palma-Adisa. She spoke about child trafficking, but we know that in addition to children, women and men, boys and girls who are vulnerable are also likely to be victims. And this is one of the findings that we found, this is one of the findings of our study in 2015-2016 for the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Persons. Mr. Berry was very instrumental in helping us with that. We looked at new trends since the 2007 study that I did with Sybil Ricketts, but we also looked at legislation, because we have ratified the Palermo Protocol against trafficking in persons, and we were looking to see how we could strengthen it, the legislation that we have, to ensure that we are totally compliant. In addition to the research in terms of updating who is vulnerable and the legislation, we also built a database for the Ministry of Justice, the National Task Force, and that will enable us as a country to be able to collate information. So as we move forward and we listen to Mr. Berry and we share into the question and answer period, I want us to think about how we can contribute to that database. And you can go to the Anti-Trafficking website. We also did a communication strategy, and I'm very encouraged by the various forms and methods that are being used. So these are some of the efforts: complementing what organizations like, or groups like Salisis has done. The Sir Arthur Lewis, they have organized public fora as well. And we ourselves at the Institute have previously done public fora on human trafficking. So it's building a momentum because this crime is not going away. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Ms. Baston to come and introduce Mr. Berry.
Good afternoon. Carl Berry, MSc BA with honors, AFI. He is a detective and an accredited financial investigator who has spent over 26 years with the Jamaica Constabulary Force. He has served several areas within the criminal investigative branch, and the counter-terrorism and organized crime branch. He is the current head of the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Intellectual Property. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of West Indies Mona campus and a Master of Science degree in Forensic Psychology and Criminal Investigations from the University of Liverpool in England. He has received training and mentorship from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the French, Colombian, and United Kingdom Police in cyber crimes, human trafficking, economic crimes, anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism, identity theft, intellectual property rights, and other financial criminal investigations. He was accredited as a financial investigator by the Caribbean Anti-Money Laundering Program. He is a trained Caribbean Financial Action Task Force mutual country examiner and a trainer in the strategic implementation process. He is a senior lecturer at the Caribbean Regional Drug Law Enforcement Center and at the Staff College of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. He is a community person and sports enthusiast whose ultimate goal is to become a philanthropist. Congregation, Carl Berry, congregation.
All right, let me use the opportunity to thank you for inviting the police in your presence. Appreciate that. My apologies too for being on the other side of being very early. And that was about a few minutes, but I still must recognize that I should have been here at 12. So please accept my apologies. I have a confession. Who wants to hear it? I was told that once a police mentions a confession, we have ears trained. Everybody wants to hear it. And it must be interesting, so I'll confess at the end. So, yeah, because I want at least to be able to get through whatever I have concocted for us and safely. Now, Professor started with a story, and I'll do so until technology smiles on us. She actually was 13 years old. She lived in Ilawash, that's Haiti, for those who are familiar with the geography. Ilawash is an island off the coast of Haiti. It's nearer to Jamaica, but it's Haitian territory. How do I know all this? My team and I did the investigation. She and her dad were happily living. They were poor, yes, because on Ilawash there is no electricity. But they were happy. They, because it was now December 24th, 2012, made a decision, and that's dad and mom and child, but mother didn't go. They decided to celebrate. What do we normally do on December 24th again? Grand marketing, we call it the many names, but at least watch nights, so many things we call it. But the reality is we try to enjoy and ring in the Christmas. So they were doing that. So having left Ilawash to Akai, which is another town, again, I can give you an example, like from Portmore into Kingston. The only thing, though, is that you have to go via boat. So whilst in Akai, or Lekai, depending on how you want to pronounce the French of it, or the Jamaican version of the French of it. They were met by 3 Jamaicans who told Dad how interesting a place Jamaica is and was, and I do agree, and the fact that if Dad agrees, daughter could come and enjoy and live happily ever after. Dad contemplated it, spoke to Mother, as in his spouse, and they agreed they should do this one. So Dad and daughter hopped onto the boat, and en route to Jamaica they were 3 Jamaicans, the dad and the 13-year-old. Whilst at sea, about 30-odd minutes, she mentioned, they killed her father in front of her, and they threw him overboard. And they took the child into St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, and they ravished her. She was raped every night. Now, why am I saying this? I spoke to her not long ago, and she has given me permission to express this to you. But it's public knowledge, because it is a matter that we concluded before the Supreme Court, the Circuit Court, that is. And they ravished her. For 4 years, she suffered it all. And among the list of things she mentioned as the worst, because she really populated a template with a list of worst things that had happened to her, and might I suggest her mother made the list, is that the man impregnated her, and the man's spouse concocted, you know the concoction that we use, the Pepsi and the Roxanil and the other things, and they dredged her. And she had to swallow, forcibly that is, and they aborted the fetus, and they gave her a bag for her to bury it. And that ranked way up on the list of things that she regretted. Now, after we rescued her, she tried to kill herself more than 16 times, even most recently. So the question is, why didn't she try to kill herself whilst undergoing the ordeal? But I have the answer, because having done forensic psychology and forensic victimology, I can tell you the answer. I suspect you too know the answer. The reality, though, is I've rescued, and my team, that is 76 plus 5, and I'll tell you why plus 5, victims since 2010. And we have never rescued a victim that has not tried to kill his or herself. And that's something significant, and several times over too. Follow where I'm going? And that's one of the reasons I think we must call ourselves to action. It's time. We have given the right up to do the right thing. You know, enough of us can talk and we can point fingers. It's easy to push it the other way. But the reality is that we cannot. We've tried everything else before, since 2000. We cannot end this crime unless we get busy. So really thankful I am, Dr. Dunn and team, for really having me here to give you another side of the discourse, because we have wasted too much time talking. I don't want to say foolishness. I can't pronounce the word, but it's mythology. And it's time for us to really get back to reality. We need solutions, and solutions that make real sense. We have embarked on the other side of the discourse, which is the pointing finger one, and not realizing that academia need to get busy doing the right thing. And why am I saying academia? Because I believe we have not tried that solution yet or properly. So Godziak and Bump did a study in 2007, and they concluded in essence that we really have failed to do it the right way. And they called on us to do research, better research, not just speculate, not just allow a group or two to decide on where we want the discourse to go. Of course, when human trafficking started, it started with us wanting to protect women and children. But might I share our reality in Jamaica? Almost even Stevens with males being way up there. So we have left off a group of people who are equally vulnerable, or if not more. And how do we mobilize resources if we don't get it right? And getting it right cannot be through speculation, can it? It must be through hardcore research. And that's what I am happy university is taking on. And I hope, will technology smile on us, or should I ride and whistle? Will technology smile, or should I ride and whistle? Just ride and whistle. My forgiveness in that regard. They are not able to push me on screen, but you have a projector. Can't you connect straight to this? I'm sure you can. I'm positive you could connect straight even to my computer. But whatever it is, I'll ride and whistle. Fair enough? So there are some frequently asked questions that come up repeatedly in the discussion. And I'm going to urge you to assist. Are we trying something else again? I'm going to urge you to assist me with the solution. I told Dr. Dunn, and I pointed her to the fact that I told her last month that I stopped writing my book. I'm done. It's finished. But when I met with her, I realized that I needed to add some things more. So I'm done, Dr. Dunn. Yes. So I'll submit my book to you for that trusted look over, and then soonest we will put a version of the discourse out that I am not saying, not bragging-ish, not bragging at all, but the majority of people who write about human trafficking, I've never actually rescued a victim. I've never actually spoken to this 13-year-old girl, but we went beyond speaking to her. We spoke to her mother, and why she hates her mother, or still hating her mother, is that her mother gave a statement, because we wanted her mother to do two things in court when we charged the offender and placed him before the court. We wanted the mother to confirm that she was her child, one, and two, that she was a juvenile. Because if you are under the age of 18, the courts treat you differently, especially when it comes to sentencing. You can get even additional 10 years on the sentencing regime. So we wanted to prove some things in court. And guess what the mother did? The mother, when she called her mother to talk to her, we were in Elavash, the mother frankly told her that she was lying. And she should stop telling lies on the man. Now here's a child who has been raped for 4 years. And the mother gave statement to the defense. And we were wobbly at a point, wondering if we should allow the defense to put that statement in, because that would damage, we thought initially, our case. But the prosecutor was eager to have the defense put it in. And if you are lawyers here, you know why. Because she was now able to show the court what type of mother, which mother on God's earth would have missed her child for 4 years, and the first thing you tell her that she's lying. Some mother? You follow where I'm going? So we were able to damage the credibility of that statement. But it didn't help the child at all, because she's wondering why. No, everybody would have abandoned me based on her script, except the police or strangers. And that's sad, and that's bad. Again, if you can feed directly from this computer or mine, I'll do that. If not, I'll shoot. So let's talk human trafficking and take the myth. Again, I don't like the word with an S now, M-Y-T-H-S. What's that again? It's not me alone. We have all of us who can't manage it. But it's all right. But you understand what it is. Let's take it out of it. So for human trafficking to work, there are several elements, at least 3, that must be proved. Human trafficking is not an academic definition as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I know. Why? Because the law makes a victim, who is a victim. And a victim is a person upon whom a human trafficking offense has been committed. No, the legal definition, thank God, is the same that they have in the UN protocol. However, there are some strategic things that we must prove before a jury. These are referred to as the legalese, or the elements of the crime. Now, we all know them in academia as the activity, the act, the means, and the purpose. Who is most familiar with that? So the activity is what was done to start this process. The activity include 5 subgroupings, 5 manifestations. It is the recruiting, the harboring, the transfer, the receipt, and we are taking out movement, but we still have it in law, of a person. That's framework 1, meaning the activity. We don't need to prove more than one of that. But if we have all, that's okay. It strengthens our case. We need the means. The means is how did they go about achieving that objective, which was to recruit or get the vulnerable person in. So was it done by trick? Was it force? Was it abduction? Was it money paid over to a parent, for example, to get possession and permission to abuse a child? Because we are seeing that, where people for a hairstyle or an outfit, they sell their child for the weekend, for the minute, and pretend as if they don't know. Hi, daughter, make sure you go up with Sammy Taxi. As if they didn't have the plan. Sammy knows what to do. Daughter is in trouble. Mother is in the party. But we know that. So that's one. It could be kidnapping, abduction. Those are the manifestations within the means. How did they achieve the activity? Now you must have the purpose. And the purpose is what is the intention? Why would the trafficker want to do all this? And it's usually to have control over mind, soul, and body, to the extent where they can direct the person and then start benefiting from it. Now, in law, all 3 elements must be linked and present in the same episode for it to be trafficking. Now, there's an exception to the rule. It says if the person is a child, meaning under the age of 18, then we don't have to prove the means. We don't have to prove that the person was coerced or forced. That manifestation is in law, and that's okay. However, if the evidence is there, we still include it. So you can't have a situation where there's no activity, but there's exploitation, and you call it so. Often what I tell people when I discuss with them, and that includes the U.S. State Department, it may walk like a duck, quack like a duck, smell like a duck, but could very much be a chicken. You follow where I'm going? And that's what we need to remember. So it's not true to say that all missing persons, all missing children are traffic victims. And I've seen that. Dr. Dunn, you'd have seen that in some writings before by prominent people. I don't want to blame them too much, because if I were to refer you to Godziak and Bump, he really had some disgraceful terminologies for people like those who take onto them some unrighteous script and call it logic. We are at the place where we need to fix it for the benefit of fixing it. All right? So let's just refresh that by understanding trafficking. Because if you understand trafficking, my little talk with you is finished. So let's do this. Remember the story that I told? Brilliant. Was that child recruited? You don't worry, you know, there's nobody marking the paper, or at least who is marking it can't take off anything from your little grade that you should get. So you're safe. And it's okay to get it wrong now, because you will get it right tomorrow. So was there recruitment? Absolutely yes. Remember, the 3 Jamaicans met Daddy and they negotiated. That's the recruitment. He told them that Jamaica, that's recruitment. And that we have proved in law as recruitment. Was the child transported? Yes. Can we agree that? Yes. And a chorus. And how so? Via boat. We're getting there. We are no professional police officers. Let's go. Yes. Was the person received? Absolutely yes, in St. Elizabeth, Burnt Savannah, to be exact. All right, so I could go on with the rest of the manifestation, but we only needed 1. And we have gotten 3 so far. So we were happy. Now, we are ticking the box, because we must, as police officers, interview the victim when they're ready. And might I suggest, it's internationally known that victims lie many times first. Actually, in my police work, I tell the police to brace for the long haul. So when we are preparing interviews with witnesses, we don't have plans for the next 2 days. because they lie and they lie and they lie and they lie, and there's an explanation for it. So the victim lied to us 14 times, 14 different statements, and the reason for that, we proved that she was told through this psychological torture that was placed in her domain that if she cooperates with police, it is to her detriment. That we would ensure that she is returned to Haiti unceremoniously, etc., etc., etc. So she saw authority figures as a negative. But we're trained, so we understand that we just need to look into it. And then the other part of interviewing a victim is when the cries and the tears come. And can you imagine somebody being asked to recount a story, and it involves being raped 21 times within a week? Tears will come. Now, we are trained to pull off, because the story must be told, but we have to be mindful of the re-traumatization that can come from it. We cannot re-traumatize the victim. So we have gotten a chance to speak to and deliberate with victims. So it normally takes us weeks to complete the statements. The sad thing in law is when you have 10 lies and then what you believe is the truth, and you must disclose those to the defense, you will have a problem in court. We're up and running, or at least up. We're up sideways-ish. Are we getting up? We're getting up. I really want you to see some of the graphics for obvious reasons, but we'll just continue if not. Fair enough? We'll work with it, so you know, my friend, because if that's the best we can do and it's okay with you, I'm good. Is it? All right, so can we kill the light, or we have to use it? This one. All right, great job. So the frequently asked questions in human trafficking are some of these, or these. What is human trafficking? How is human trafficking different from migrant smuggling? Because people are of the opinion that migrant smuggling or human smuggling is the same as human trafficking. It is not. What if a trafficked person consents? Say a person who is attending the university and is about to be, you call it delisted, what is the name again? When deregistered, and really needs to close a gap, and it's just 90,000. What if the person decides to go to 16.5 upon the road and decide to do business tonight? You follow? Is it trafficking? I'll answer those two. How widespread is human trafficking? A question that people, for different reasons, just put numbers out there. And Dr. Dunn, you would have come across some figures that we wonder, seriously, how did they get that number? Actually, there's one number suggesting that there are 48.5 million slaves right now in the world. Okay, and how did you come by that number? So we wrote walkfree.org because they suggested that we had about, I think, 4,000 slaves in Jamaica. But they gave a specific number, 4,701. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So how did you get the number so scientific? So we wrote them and asked them through the task force to explain to us the methodology used and some other questions we asked. They wrote us back. And you want us to tell you what Walk-Free said to us? Go find them. Wasn't that rude? Yes. Mind you, we were frustrated at the minute, but we took counsel. And guess what? We have found 76 plus 5 so far. The argument about credibility and whether the numbers are accurate is secondary to the reality that if even one person is enslaved, wouldn't that be one too many? So why are we worrying about accuracy of data? And we spend all the time quarreling with each other about accuracy. And the next year, a bigger number comes out. Are we doing the right thing? We made a mistake on the war on drugs because we were fighting drugs and not the demand for it. So what if we finally address some studies geared towards demand reduction? Do you think that could be novel, maybe? If not novel, at least a better way to go? Well, if you read my book, that comes out as a big chapter. Thank you, Tara, for being present. Which countries are affected by human trafficking? And I've seen scholars in the modern era still, even though we have enough information on the internet, singling out countries. Now, it must be madness, and again my word, for somebody in the new era to be thinking that only poor countries are impacted. And people are accepting that. We need academia's help. And I'm saying we, because I want to be honest about what I'm saying. You follow? I beg you to go this direction. So I was at the Reno University in November this year, and we were having a discussion. Last year, thank you. Much appreciated. At least somebody's listening, correct? Indeed. Thank you much for that. And the professor at the Reno University, we were talking, and the big war that we had, I won't name people, was on what Amnesty had put out. Are you following Amnesty with respect to trafficking? Amnesty made a solution, well, gave one, a possible one. And on the back end of the solution that Amnesty gave was to suggest that we may be in our right, or it could be a good decision, to decriminalize sex work. And some of the discussion was around whether it could be a human right violation if you stop somebody from using their body the way they want to. Now, it's food for thought, because I was told recently that males can be feminists, so I am. Squeeze me in it. Mind you, I have my doubts, but squeeze me there. So when I heard the story, I rubbished it up front. And we were barking up Amnesty tree. And as a result, Interpol, I might add quickly because I'm in this, I'm blowing my own trumpet now, that I'm a member of the Interpol expert group on human trafficking. And the only person from this side of the world who is, and I'm grateful. So we were congregated in Switzerland at the Global Conference on human trafficking. And the world came to visit with Interpol. And a part of the panel discussion, we agreed that we wanted Amnesty International there, right? Because if they are writing these things and publishing it, we need to have a discourse. We were pumped up. In the pre-meeting, we were ready for the fight. When Amnesty was finished with all of us, they obviously picked the best to send to do the presentation. And she asked for questions. There was none. I urge you to read what they have published and not take it from a third party to include me. So let's discuss solution whilst I walk. Fair enough? Could decriminalization of sex work be a solution, a possible one? And if yes, also. This is where I want the questions to be skewed from academia when you are doing your research, you know. Also. If we get busy thinking these thoughts, then we are in a better position to appreciate point of views instead of rubbish them from third parties' opinion. So here are some of the reasons given, and I have jumped onto the bandwagon-ish, because I still am of the view that no woman should be exploited that way. So I said, ish. When you criminalize that area of operation, do you run the likelihood of prosecuting a victim? Is there the likelihood? And what if one victim is prosecuted? Wouldn't that be disastrous for what we're trying to achieve? Mind you, the jury is still out, and I must put a disclaimer now that my views are mine alone. I'm suable, so you can sue me. It does not necessarily represent any other organization, and that includes the UA. Fair enough? Indeed. But I urge you, though, at the end to contemplate it and give me a feedback, because we're at the stage where we need to approach the legislature to ask them to do some work. And if your input is solid, mind you, it will be so nice. But I know 6 countries that have gone the route. And even though it's early days yet, it looks good. What is the most commonly identified form of trafficking? Immediately everybody, sex trafficking, child trafficking. And if you tackle them, they add forced labor. There are 16 ways in which money laundering manifests itself, you know. And the ones we're mentioning might not be the most lucrative. But we have forced scholarship into people's cranium to believe that the only way a person can be trafficked is through sex or forced labor. Not remembering that terrorists have stopped doing terrorism and are doing trafficking. Who remember Boko Haram and the Chibok 300 girls? They were forced to marry. Forced marriage is a manifestation of human trafficking. It's an exploitation. It is human trafficking. And did you know there are parts of this world where people are pulling people down and retailing their body parts? If you were to go to a dated study by the World Health Organization in 2002, it suggested that kidneys were being sold for €200,000 on the black market. Now we're talking about 2002. What do you think that figure looks like now? And do you think criminals, knowing that a lot of people are on the last stage and need some intervention, maybe a new kidney to continue living? But let me ask a soft question. You don't have to answer as if it's you. Just think about it as a third cousin you have who is bad. That bad third cousin. So it's not you, you are now shifting gears, personality. So it's not you. What if you had $10 million and your doctors were to tell you that you need a kidney to continue living by 2 weeks' time? How would you approach it? Would you just go simply to die? So you would ask people around to give you one. Did you know that even the people who take the vow sometimes that to death do us part? If you ever approach them and say, I need one, them say them sick. And they tell you, no, they give you some stories. I wonder if those people are your friends, you know. But would you give me your kidneys if I needed it, may I ask? The answer is straight up no, unless you want to be politically incorrect or correct. But it's straight up, not my kidney. Now, how much, because I'm really getting there, would you of that $20 million be willing to pay to continue living? For one. Remember, it's hypothetical. Come now, people, remember it's your third cousin, you know, it's not, no, you wouldn't put all because you need money to recoup, you know. But 15 easily. You might start at 10, but if him no, you say 15 mil. Now, if you were a human trafficker and you realize that there exists this opportunity, somebody has 15 million us and wants one, what would you do as a trafficker? Would you tell the person that you are too honest a criminal? Or would you now start asking some questions? How tall are you? What's your blood type? And deep down in this, there is a figure called a nephrologist. For this to work, they require the support and expertise of a nephrologist. Now, do you know who is a nephrologist? That person doesn't come a dime a dozen at all. extremely bright on top of bright, because you'd have to complete med school and do some more work. But they can match DNA, because you know the body naturally refuses what comes in if it's not its, or is, or hers. So he, the nephrologist, will do the work, because the criminal doesn't have the time to check your blood type. So he'll culture 4 or 5 kidneys and then tell you that I have the thing, you know. You have the money still, and your response will be, how soon can I get it? And sadly, people are traveling away from their countries to different countries to do the operations under the guise of being tourists. Food for thought. What is the role of transnational, if any, organized crime in this big game? I call it a game, and I'll tell you why. What types of industries, if any, are involved? You will have to answer these too, you know. Is there a legal instrument to tackle human trafficking? What are the major challenges faced in the battle to fight this crime? Do many traffickers get caught? And if so, do they get convicted? I guess you have answers for most of these already, you know. What can I do to help the fight is what I want to get from you before I leave here. At least, because I was at Mile Gully High School just, and they really gave me, and I must commend Port Antonio High School for being the first school, possibly in the world, to have enacted a human trafficking club. And it came out of a solution exercise that we were trying to develop. And one student did so and said, sir, how can I help? And I say, it's over to you, but we have some solutions. And I suggest, just like we have other clubs in school, maybe you could think of a situation and they say, thank you, sir. And I was invited today to their soft launch of it. But I couldn't come because who would miss this opportunity? So let's get busy doing that. What are the victims? Who that is? And the traffickers. Who are they? And if I suggest to you that they could be just the person you spoke to this morning, would you disagree? Well, we need to get serious because we need to find them. So the world reacted slowly, because you know the argument on slavery has been around with us and the debates and the studies from time, long time. It got serious-ish in the 90s, but it came to a head in year 2000. When the United Nations congregated with all of the world's countries, well, the majority, and they decided that something had to be done positively. One of the biggest problems we had, and still we seem to be having, is that we can't have one solid definition that tells me. So for a computer, I know by definition that this is a car. I can go out and say this is a car, correct? For human trafficking, the United Nations created a definition. But there are so many variations that it worries me. And I ask me the question, because I sleep and talk. I do. So please don't tell me anything, because I might tell in my sleep. But I talk only to me, though, so it doesn't go out. And I talk to me religious. You know, some people talk to themselves on the road. I don't do it. I am scared of car accidents or things eating into me. So I talk when I reach home and I'm sleeping. And I ask myself, what is the benefit to be had when we try not to have a full definition and a full and agreed definition for a crime so dangerous? This crime threatens humanity, you know, and I can tell you many ways in which it will and has and is threatening us. It remains a blot on humanity. And sadly, it is almost destroying the future. You know the cliche, the children. And the reality is, I am happy to announce that the United Nations acted in the year 2000. They recognized several things. One, they created a protocol to deal with transnational organized crime because they realized that criminals were not in it just for the fun of it anymore, but instead for the... And with globalization and advancing the ICT platform and technology, criminals were doing stuff all across the world. So they had to do something and created a framework where law enforcement now could fight it better. I'm happy to announce that they also recognize human trafficking as an urgent issue. So it was made an urgent priority for states back then. And with the ratification in 2003, it made it more so because states were forced, my word, to domesticate this protocol in their legislation. So you find that now almost every country in the world has a domestic legislation treating with trafficking. Sadly, again, my word, there's no uniformity. So a criminal might be able to get away with the act if done from a country in another country. You follow where I'm going? And that is a recommendation that we need to again make. More on that. The protocol against the smuggling of migrants. The UN realized that migrant smuggling, human smuggling, was different from human trafficking. But they also recognized that the same crime group, transnational organized criminals, were the ones participating in both. And they realized that where an episode would start as smuggling, it very much might end as human trafficking. And the Libya crisis is a prime example. You would have read that, I hope. And this protocol was created. So to my mind, the year 2000 was significant at the UN. How are we doing 17 years on? Your guess is as good as mine. So introduction long after I started. Did you know that Jamaica gets ranked like all other countries except maybe St. Kitts in the world against some criteria that the US has? So the US has a legislation on trafficking, and in it creates some criteria to allow the Department of State to do some work externally. So are you aware of the tip report? And if not, please Google it. You can just type in Jamaica or the country you're from and which year and the tip report, and it just pops up. Did you know that when you pop open Jamaica, this is what a southerner, a person way far removed from Jamaica, will be reading about us? Because remember, we are the land of sea, sun, and sweet people. We are, aren't we? And we register Bolt, Bob Marley. You know, we register some good people who have done well, mind you, and some ones who have done so not so well. So when you pop Jamaica open, this is what you see, you know. That we are a source, meaning from whence this crime originates. They no longer regard us as a transit, and that's interesting, but that's since the last 2 years. And destination country for whom? Adults and children who are subjected to human trafficking, sex trafficking, exploitative child labor, as well as forced labor. Does this sound like a righteous endorsement? Or something serious for contemplation? The only consolation we have is that the majority of the world's countries are so classified. But that couldn't be consolation. You follow where I'm going? Human trafficking is globally recognized as a transnational organized criminal event. It's not an act. It's an entire process that continues. It's morph, and it's morphing. And it is getting even more serious because too many of us have given up the right to do the right thing. And we are good at talking. Sadly, implementation and acting is not what we're known for. But we have a global example, don't we? Who remember Ebola and when it came? And might I suggest it was the first time in my police career I became afraid. I've been shot at more than 11 times. I think, had the gunmen been trained, I would have been one of the people if they put something on my tombstone, you get to read about. But I became afraid when I heard about Ebola and what it was doing. Who was afraid too? Only me? No, man, don't do this to me. Just at least one other. Thank you, three of us then. Say? That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going, you know. Ebola was classified as urgent. Did you know? To the point where I started worrying. I said, I'm not traveling. But then I said, I am not traveling, but people are traveling. So, and me not safe. And I saw people on TV dying on the TV just so. Get it dead. And I said, but I don't remember a crime. I think gunshot not doing that sometimes. So we said, what is this? And what was worse, I was writing some work for University of Liverpool at the time, and I was asked to go to that big hotel beside the wagon wheel in Lilliput, St. James, you know the one on the right? Oh yes, you've been there too, indeed. But it's on the internet too, yes. And I was asked to go there for 3 days with the US to discuss intellectual property rights. That was a Caribbean forum. I couldn't miss it. And whilst there, I think, was it Chick-fil-A time? But anyway, things was happening too. But whilst there, and checked in now, because I was fretting, you know, so I said, I'm safe now. I was told that somebody in the hotel have it. Jesus have mercy. No, you can salt, so? Oh, how can one man be so salt? I am trying to insulate myself. And it was chaotic. Ambulance, everything. I said, Lord, me just come dead down here, so. Because I think I have contribution to make, you know. And me just gone, so. And I was worried. And the world, despite the criticism, decided to act, didn't they? And that's why we're asking, Ebola what? So why can't we use the same framework on human trafficking? Especially the one that we can control, because we have control over variables here, you know. We know who can be a possible victim, a human, and we know who can be a trafficker, a human. So, what are we waiting on to fix it? Maybe academia. So let's get busy. All right? So just some thoughts. The world is on the shake-up, it would appear. People are being displaced for more reasons than one. Venezuela has now been overburdening Trinidad, because Trinidad is less than a stone's throw from Venezuela, and they come in. I was in Curacao recently at a forum it was, on human trafficking. And my role is, when I go to a country, they have to show me the other side. So I asked to be taken to the go-go clubs and where the prostitutes were. Not because I wanted prostitutes, but because I wanted to understand. It was with other people. May I add that quickly, just in case? Yeah, but I do undercover operations everywhere. And quickly, I was approached for sex for $10 US. Venezuelan. Because they are illegally in and chances are being controlled, any money is enough money. And the criminals are maximizing. They are using a Chinese here, the Chinese principle. Small something, big profit? Yeah. Quick sale, something like, thank you for that, academia. Yes. So if they have 100, instead of trying to hold out on the price, you just do a $10, you know. And trust me, business was booming. But who gets shafted in the process? The female. And somebody gets rich or richer at a point. We can't allow that to sustain itself. So we know that Syria has its own problem too. We know that on top of that, harsh economic conditions. And I asked a group of people recently, what are some of the things that would have caused you to immediately leave from the place that you're in, whichever country? What are some of them? Crime. And if you don't think it's bearable, you're gone. What else? And we could list them. Social and political turmoil would cause people to jump on another boat. And the people who are traffickers know that. You want to leave, you know that. And if you are a trafficker, where would you position your business for 2018? You wouldn't do some business near Venezuela corner? No, you're a trafficker. You have no regard for humans. Wouldn't you want to have something open in Libya? My point exactly. So let's walk. Now, they are real facts, but it's whether they are our facts or they are real facts, because we now have new words in the lexicon, correct? Fake news and something the truth and all that, and so it's your facts, my fact, world facts. Did you know or did you not know that slavery is outlawed in almost, and I dare say, every country in the world? But guess what? Now something is wrong with that, you know. Better yet, everything is wrong with that. So we thought in 1834 in the English experiences side that it really stopped, and with the 4 years of apprenticeship that it ended. Fast forward though in the 21st century, and guess what we have? Slavery on a more magnificent scale, a huge, uncompromising scale. We have problems. Slavery, if you are very conservative and want to think the thoughts of 2007, it's okay to walk on the side of 32 billion US dollars. And there must be a mathematician here, because I'll be asking you to tell me what the Jamaican equivalent is. I have refused to trouble math. And I gave the story, but because the camera is on me, I won't. You know? But after 5 tries, I realized that I was in trouble, but I took solace in the fact that the entire class also failed. So we did some work, and as a detective, I found out that my math teacher didn't pass math. But I got over it eventually. That's why perseverance is good. So on my 6th attempt, I got it. If we had just stuck with him, I would have registered world record, because we weren't quitting. But so the big figure is the one, and I'm saying that in law enforcement, we are thinking a bigger figure. But because it's not scientific, we also will just talk. And I emphasize quickly, just like other researchers would have, that most of these figures are really just to engage a discourse. Because there's no money with a stamp mark, money laundered funds, right? Or human trafficked funds, correct? So it's kind of difficult, no matter what scientific method. I don't know, Doc, if one can be created to say this is the number. But what we can say, though, if we do just a quick calculation, and we use our understanding of what is happening in transnational organized crime, this figure might be dwarfed massively. Yeah. But I am resisting the temptation to pretend like police know more than what academics know. I think we might, but I'm not whispering that. No, I'm whispering it. Some facts and more for you. Did you or did you not know that human trafficking has progressed on the back end of worldwide poverty? Dr. Dunn can tell you that. Globalization and the modern form. And on the back end of the modern ICT interfaces, platforms, and more so now, the darknet. My question to you, academia, is, do you agree with the sentiments up here or the stated fact, their fact, our fact, your fact, that poverty is a serious factor in the human trafficking game? We can agree that, correct? Because I don't normally get everybody agreeing with me, you know, being police. So if that's true, can I ask another question though? Do you think we have poverty in Jamaica? No, that's good. Don't beat me so hard. You don't have to look at me in such a venomous tone. Just some questions. So do I need to ask the other question then? As to whether we have trafficking? Oh. But what are we doing about it? Ah, brilliant. And you see the role of academia, because it's lifting to a small group, Dr. Dunn knows, of people across the world to go past this information, which is wrong. But I'm glad you came. And my thing is, hashtag a new conversation. So starting tonight, better yet, this evening, when next you engage, a part of what you must do is chip in a discourse or a piece of it on human trafficking. Ensure that your household understands it enough, and where you don't have the data, go get it. Spend less time on Facebook or other social sites, because some of us are only putting ourselves in harm's way. The longer some of us stay on social sites, the more likely it is that some of us will become victims. So why not do the right thing and do the right thing? Food for thought. And please tell your kids that they can go online, but go research human trafficking. Again, some numbers, and remember, don't worry about the numbers, please, and thanks, or help us to get the numbers well. Fair enough? So case study number 1 was discussed with you. And that's the one we discussed. It was one bed, and the common law wife was there while he was raping the girl. No, something is wrong with that, you know. No, but everything seems to be wrong with that. But I guess it can happen. So I spoke to you and we didn't have the benefit of technology smiling, so I just run this over. That the activity includes those manifestations, the means, those, and the purpose. And all must be present and linked for it to work in the same episode. But for kids, we don't have to prove the means. But if we have it, we will include it. All right? So we walk again. So who, therefore, is a victim? Now, this is one of the most confused, it would appear, part of human trafficking. Everybody seems to know more than us who is a victim. So let me ask, without, this is not meant to embarrass, is there anybody here who has ever met a victim of trafficking? Of human trafficking? Yeah, but met as in you met and think you know. It's not unsurprising. But if you were to put in human trafficking, you'll see everybody writing up on this thing, you know. And I remember a person called us, and again, that person shall remain nameless, and told us how much of a victim they have, and how the victim has been abused in forced labor, and the whole 9 yards. We were incensed by it, and we reacted immediately. We observed something, though, that the person was very reluctant to discuss with us. But that's okay, that's not new. After a while, we got another call that the person was being abused now at the location. When we turned up, because the person didn't know, because they were 4 hours away from us, so I dispatched my team immediately because they were near. The person had nails, new eyelashes in, lipstick, and all that. And the person at our end who introduced the victim to us was most convinced, you know. So we were able to confront the victim and say, the person said, it's not me name, so. So another police said, no, it's she. And you know what was worse? Her son said, Mommy, I don't saw your name. You know, children, hey, you see children? No matter what you tell them, you have to be careful and say, Mommy, I know that your name. And she blurted out the correct name. She would have dragged down the person who reported to us more than 2 million. And came for our money. Because there's a program within government that allows victim to get something. And if we weren't careful, that person would have gone on a crusade to say they met a victim, don't it? Of what? Human trafficking. So, I don't know if that's right, the law defines it. I think it's important because if we are going to adjudicate on this before the court, then you need to know. So guess who is a victim? All of you know. A person. But it must be more than that, don't it? Indeed. A person, albeit male or female, once a person has been birthed, I hope that's a word, and whatever age left, because there's no cutoff age, against whom the offense of trafficking, remember, for it to be an offense, it must have satisfied the criterion or the full criteria, correct? Brilliant. So let's walk. So if we get that in our cranium, we now need to know that we must match some things up for this to really be. All right? So let's agree this if we can, because we have been agreeing a few things. Now, those responsible for addressing trafficking and related issues must be able to differentiate between the sensational and the, because you know that some people just put things out there, and the more serious literature. Too many of us get caught up in trying to meet deadlines or whatever it is, and we say us to mean global us. And we just agree with the next publication. So somebody says something and that's true. And sadly, you don't get the chance all the while to say to the person, you are talking rubbish. So, Godziak and Bump call for more rigor in the, to engage the discourse. He wanted quality, he wanted a mixture, a cocktail approach actually, because qualitative alone, he suggested, might not necessarily work. Quantitative has its own limitation, because we're talking about feelings here, and possible things you can't measure. Legal, policy, etc., etc. And he gave a list in his research as to what other you should put out. And he did a taxonomy on it, and his findings were clear, and he added and concluded that even what he did was not enough or sufficient. Fair enough? So let's walk. A great deal of research has focused on trafficking mainly for sexual exploitation to the detriment of, and we have agreed that, don't it? Investigated the other side. Because when we talk about sexual exploitation, it's usually only females. And guess what? We know females are impacted severely in this. There's no if. And that's why a gender perspective is important. But whilst we are fighting this side, please don't abandon the next fight or the other fight, because we will lose the fight. What is it about a battle and a war? You can win one and lose one, correct? Point exactly. The uneven focus on sex trafficking and the amount of publication that exists when you weigh it against others is stifling, man. It's serious. It needs work. And something or everything is wrong with it. But it's for thought. The dominant discourse in trafficking is not evidence-based. And maybe it's because it's blossoming, I don't know. But this is, again, what Godziak, Bump, and others would have suggested. The analysts that he and others would have done, and Sangakkara and others, said so. Of course, these are dated studies, but having reviewed the current literature, there is improvement, I can say, but we could be better off. We're still making the mistake of doing what people are saying we shouldn't be doing. And that's where we need to change. All right? Because we now know what trafficking is. So let's get busy now talking solutions. And that's not coming. And if they come, they are vague. People are telling you need to have 1,000 police in a force that maybe have only 900 people. It's not going to make sense. So I have created 55 recommendations, of which about 90% require no new money or money at all. And I'm urging states to pick and choose, and let's solve this one. All right? So despite increase, we are not grounded empirically, and that too is a problem. So Bump again. The scale, the phenom, limited understanding of victims, life experiences. Some people only talk from the statements that are produced in court. They didn't visit Elavash to get the understanding as to what caused that girl to be trafficked. And they would have just seen the example of her being trafficked. These are some of the things that are required. And I see forensic victimology as an approach. I do not hold brief for forensic victimology, and I'm sure the scientific world will be challenging it too. But I think it is one of the better approaches. But that's only my police opinion on it. Poor understanding of the modus operandi of traffickers and their networks. Because we sometimes, and there was scholarship in the early day, that tells victims that they don't have to cooperate with law enforcement. Now, when you tell a person who has been impacted by transnational organized crime that they should not, or they don't have to speak to us, how do we solve the crime? Because the crime can't be solved without the victim. So I'm happy they're adding a little down the bottom, a little line to suggest that cooperation is also an important part. So whereas you tell them they don't have to, they must know. Because in order for a victim to get the restitution that the law provides, the law must first find them to be a victim. So the first case we did was R.V. Gurinani. And Gurinani was an Indian, still is, national, who brought into Jamaica 7 male Indian nationals to work for him. He told them they would be okay. But instead, he deprived them of everything. They were abused, and they were working for little and nothing. Gurinani was convicted. And on the trial, we asked the prosecutor to remind the judge that the law was amended and that there exists an application that should be made, and if made, for consideration. It's called restitution. As a consequence, he was fined, convicted, and demands made on him to pay millions of dollars over to the victims, calculated by us. based on what we know, again, forensic victimology helps us to find the truth of it so the right victim can get fixed up. Lack of evaluation research, and we know the lack, so we're not wasting time, especially with time running. And how are we for time, Doc? Reasonable-ish? How much is left? Good. That's good enough for me to really dash into a part that I want to go. So, I've been telling you about human trafficking, and loads of it, and hopefully you are getting what I'm trying to say about the role of academia and how you can play it even more, because you've been playing it, no if. We know that threats, abuse, and exploitation are central to this regime. We know that. We know that a vast majority of women and children most times can't speak the language that they exist. So remember the 13-year-old girl from Haiti? She was not taught to speak or encouraged to speak English or Patois. So the man could speak Asian language and French. So she had to go to him for any support. So you realize how she had to be submissive? So they used language. When we rescued the 21 Honduran kids, they were from Honduras, but they couldn't speak Spanish. They spoke Mosquito. Now, to find a speaker of Mosquito in Jamaica was and still remain the most difficult thing. So we called Professor Anjani from University up here. You know him? And Professor Anjani came. And after 4 hours with the victim, I realized there was not much on the page. And I saw him sweating from up here. Wicked. Mosquito, that language is impossible. And a part of what we must do is communicate with the victim to understand their feelings. So can you imagine the police speaking Mosquito, and we have never heard it? But we did a good job because they left better off. So it's obvious that we did it right. I don't know. But it was Christmas, maybe that helped us. God can. In fact, there are instances where people are in the community. This Asian girl did not get the chance to play with the other girls. She couldn't leave the house. And she was guarded by pit bulls. So she could freely walk in the yard, but she couldn't run. Frequently, they are mistreated and their passports taken off them. And we know what happened. So we know there are more slaves in the world than at any other point in our history. And for source, you can go to the US Department of State website and you'll get even much more. So globally, traffickers force children to work in sweatshops, construction sites, or as domestic servants, streets as child beggars. They're doing that in Europe with the Nigerian kids, in wars as child soldiers, on farms, on the ICs, the 21 Honduran kids were picked up. They were farming conch and lobster. They were forced to work 18 hours per day for 3 weeks at a time, and they were paid $20 US for their efforts. In traveling as sales crew, or in traveling sales crew in restaurants, everywhere. Great job. So, we're on to solution, but just to remind you that the kids are in trouble. We're happy to report that we concluded our first revenge porn case in court recently. And the sentences was really good. All right, so I'll just go to solution and then end. How do we fix this problem? May I take it from you? I just want one from you. Is there anybody with any recommendation as to how we fix this problem? Go ahead.
It's not novel, but just even getting information is like crucial.
Great job. So at least one person might buy my book. Thank you for that. Yes. Recommendation, go ahead.
For the airport on the Cameroon, because I've been in a situation where I've seen a police while transiting the airport and it doesn't never look right to me. But immigration didn't do anything, customs didn't do anything, so put the whole airport on the Cameroon.
But it is.
What I saw, more or less, I was in Panama with a couple of friends, and this couple joined us waiting for the flight, and immediately the young lady drew our attention because of what was dressed fashionably. But at the same time, the hair didn't match. Her hair was like a child's hairstyle, which was dressed up. They got on the flight, they sat together, they were together the whole time. And when they reached the line for immigration, they were not together. They were not. So I figured at the time that maybe he had taken a schoolgirl to Panama a weekend. At first he looked like a foreigner, but then he started to look more Jamaican. And then one day I was in my office and a man with a similar description came into my exact office and I was so afraid. I told him what I had seen because I was kind of telling him to protect myself. It was not the same person. But he started telling me, well, was it so-and-so? I said, no, it wasn't so-and-so. But I think I know who it is now. But they separated to go to immigration. They did not know each other.
And that's why, and I must recognize Tara, if you don't mind, you could stand. She's from the UK and she's doing big job with us as police, more so immigration though. Thank you. And what we're doing is empowering, strengthening immigration. We're educating the immigration officers across the Caribbean. So right now we have pulled out individuals for expertise in the game. We have at least 2 who understand it well and many more. We have worked with airline ambassadors to make sure at least 300 people who work on the ports and where the ships are understand human trafficking. We also recently did some work on the cruise ship. We were in the hotels, and I'm happy to report that there are some hotels now with our sign on the front. If you go to Rio Santan, you'll see it. It's demonstrated as you turn up, just to tell people that we don't countenance human trafficking. So I must wrap up. And this is the sad part for me, but maybe the happy part for you. I hope not. But the reality is, we must engage everybody. That's education. We must. We must ensure that when the message is being passed, it is correct message. We must target the right people with the right message, because currently we have the right message going to the wrong people. So we have kids telling them foolishness, and we are trying to put information in traditional media when we know that the kids have no interest in that. So at the forum recently over UA, one member said that he can develop an app because we wanted an app. But I didn't want an app that allows you just to interface and learn, just to read from. I wanted an app that allows interface, so you could send me a question and I ask you one and we talk trafficking. And he said that he has the capability and he's willing to do it. We want to place that app on tablets in schools, on the people's phones, the ones who are most vulnerable. And to end it all, just to remind university students, however young you are, that you are sometimes even more vulnerable than the kids. And I ask university in my closing statement too, to remind us when you have job fairs and those exposés, so that we can turn up. But if you don't, my team was instructed that when we see the media pushing that, we put on the tip shirts and turn up. And when we see the booths with the job offers overseas, we position there for the day. And they can't tell us move. And you know what we have noticed since we have started doing that? the boot them just get empty. All of a sudden, them just pull up. And that's okay. We need good global citizens to get busy because this fight cannot be won by any single person, entity, organization, any two anyway. But instead, when all of us get serious about protecting our future and that of others. Might I suggest, Doc, that it was righteous when you offered the invite. I didn't skip a beat, I had to take it. But might I thank you more, though, for listening to the police, and more so, listening to the end to the police. I thank you.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Berry has whetted our appetite and has instilled in us the need to learn a lot more? He has challenged us as academia to ensure that we do more rigorous research and collaborate. And he has tasked each of us to do some action, whether it is now homes, communities, online, or whatever, so we can eliminate the scourge of human trafficking. We're going to allow time for 2 questions because we're told that we do need to finish at 2 o'clock. And then we're going to ask Jamar Duff, who is one of our BSc students, to give the vote of thanks. Yes, please go ahead.
This is really not a question, but I have done some work with the Optimist International in North Carolina. My sister is very vocal and instrumental in doing research and work with human trafficking. And I'd just like to mention this book. It's called Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Rudon, which is written on the effects that human trafficking has had on women and how they overcome this devastating effect. Thank you.
Thank you. And we want to ensure also that the research on men who are trafficked is also there. We thank you very much for that. Because, in fact, the study that we did for the National Task Force identified men who have sex with men as one of the at-risk groups, the new at-risk groups. Why? Because of the discrimination and stigma, men who are trafficked are less likely to come forward. Right? So we need to be aware and connect those dots. Also to note that we do have graduate students who are doing work on social protection for commercial sex workers, because right now we discriminate against them because of the activity that they're doing. So I think collaboration from different partners can help us to address this issue in a more systematic way. Another question? Okay, or comment, yes? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm happy.
Could you allow her to use the mic, please?
Thank you very much for the invite. Thank you, Mr. Berry. As nurses and academia, we have been contemplating and looking at the effects of human trafficking, and we have always been trying to find a way as healthcare providers to be able to identify them when they come as clients to our healthcare facilities, because they do come and we may miss some of the signs, and that's one of the reasons why we took our lunch hour to come. And I would like to speak to Mr. Berry off the air, because there are some little things that we need to iron out. And our students are going out in the community in a few weeks, and when he mentioned some of the things, there was one thing that I was pointing out to my students, that they need to be able to identify so that we as healthcare providers are able to play our part in the fight against human trafficking.
Thank you very much for that contribution.
All right, we recognize the importance of the health fraternity. And as a result, what we did, and I use we to mention the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Person, we just recently completed the standard operational procedure for healthcare workers. We're currently training out. We have trained nearly 200. Come tomorrow, we are in Montego Bay, that's nearer. But we will be with nearly 100 more doctors, nurses, etc. So that document will be circulated to all nurses as well. And there's a flow chart that will allow you to understand how to deal with certain issues there.
I should also point out that the task force has done training of judges and lawyers as well. And there's a curriculum for schools. In fact, it has been rolled out since last year, and it is to build awareness, because years ago when we started this work, there's a view in the educational sector that this wasn't a problem. You know, it wasn't happening. And we know it is very real, and the more we can get on board and take off our blinkers, the better we are, in fact, able to address it. Our faith-based organizations, many of them are on board. The study we did said that many of them didn't know very much about it, but they were interested. And I know the United Church of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, the Anglican Church, and others have been doing work on human trafficking. Because if you're interfacing with people every single week, it means that you're able to pick up, and the more aware you are, the more you can, in fact, support this. So the airports, the health sector, the education sector, everywhere, everyone has to be on board in terms of fighting human trafficking. I'm going to invite Mr. Duff, one of our BSc students in gender and development. We have them, a good core of them. We have graduated over 100. We're very proud of them. We have over 100 who have done minors in gender and development. Many of them have gone on to work in the government sector, private sector, but also to do graduate studies. So, welcome, Mr. Duff. Duff.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the IGDS Research Days Planning Committee, I wish to thank our guest presenter, DSP Carl Barry, for an engaging and informative lecture on human trafficking. We are grateful that you accepted our invitation to shine the light on an issue which has a far-reaching impact on each and every one of us. Thanks to the chair, Dr. Leith Dunn, who has also done extensive work on human trafficking. We appreciate the additional insight you provided on the study and the impact of human trafficking on the Jamaican society. To all our guests, thank you for attending, and I hope you are fully informed and will be moved to action if required to do so. Finally, thanks to my colleagues from the Gender Society who have volunteered to assist the Institute in participating in the university's research days. Do have yourself an extraordinary day. Thank you.
And we're going to invite Mr. Duff to make a presentation to Mr. Berry. Thank you very much. Yes, Hillary.
I wanted to point still after the formal session. May we let people know about a kind of a follow-up that WMW is doing to this?
Yes.
Yes. So.
Could you give her the mic, please?
Thank you.
And tell us who WMW is.
Yes. So WMW is a women's organization. We do advocacy and training, public education research. And on February 16, which is that 10 days away? Less than. It's next week Friday. In the evening, we will be showing 3 films, 2 of which are directly related to the topics we've been talking about. The abduction of girl children for sex, and human trafficking, sex trafficking. And these are local films, they're locally produced, they're feature films, they're like mini feature films. So they're not documentaries, they're action-packed. But we're showing them in order to encourage further discussion about this issue. And so if anybody's interested, I'll stay around for another 5-10 minutes. You can come and get some information from me or from Patricia over there. Because the screening will be on Friday evening in the Halfway Tree area, well, near to Andrews Memorial Hospital in that area. So it'll be a film screening and discussion of local films on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. That is me.
Thank you, Mr. Berry, for an excellent presentation.
Always. All hands on deck. I just want to make mention of our introduced Ms. Heslop, who is here. Ms. Heslop, could you just, she's from the EKA CDM project, Enhancing Knowledge in terms of Comprehensive Disaster Management. It's a project that the Institute is also supporting through integrating gender perspectives in climate change and disaster risk management. Now, why is this important? Climate change and disasters increase the risk of human trafficking because already vulnerable population groups are going to be even more vulnerable if someone comes and offers you a solution. So the takeaway today, make the linkages, the poverty, but also the issue of climate change and disasters. Thank you very much for coming and have a blessed day. Please enjoy some refreshments that we have prepared. Thanks to our media for supporting us and for covering UWI TV.